Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I'm really excited to welcome our next podcast guest to the podcast, and it's Tarin from Remote Team Wellness. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I was just thinking, did I actually pronounce your name correctly?
Honestly, it's actually no big deal. My name's Tarin, but any way that you want to pronounce it is completely all right with me. Honestly, like it's a 2-syllable name, but you have no idea how many people are like Tarin. And I've lived in enough places around the world to not really be too nitpicky about how my name is pronounced. So however you want to do it. However it comes out.
Where does the name come from?
Oh, actually, the name itself comes from Ireland. Riddle me that.
Which is why it's so difficult to pronounce.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so difficult to pronounce, because all Celtic language is so intense. So it comes from Tara, but I don't spell it like normal Tarin spelled with like the R-R-Y-N. I spell it T-A-R-I-N. So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid name.
It is, yeah. And for everyone and anyone that has lived in Ireland or is still living in Ireland, you know that their names are sometimes pronounced very differently than they are spelled. And I've had a lot of challenges with that while I was living in Ireland. Yeah, that's really cool. All right. Well, Tarin, I'm really excited to have you today. We already had a quick introduction call a few days ago, so I'm excited for you to share again who you are, where you live, and what you've been up to today.
Yeah, I would love to. So my name is Tarin Calmeyer. I live currently in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. But I'm originally from South Africa, from Johannesburg, South Africa, but via quite a few places, which I'm sure you'll hear through my accent. I've been up to doing some calls with clients today, doing some follow-up emails. And I was actually just telling you before we hopped on the call, like I really have just felt this wave of productivity. So whenever I feel those spaces of like just natural push of productivity, I like to ride them. And it's been one of those days. So nice. I feel really good about that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really nice. And so tell us a little bit more about Remote Team Wellness and how you started that company.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, Remote Team Wellness has been one of the most incredible roller coaster rides I've ever gotten onto in my life. So we are a virtual corporate wellness solution. And this is a company that both my life and business partner and I started together last year. So my partner Andrew and I were separated last year during the pandemic lockdown in South Africa. I was in South Africa, he was in the United States. And in order for us to, just have a little bit of something else to talk about rather than I miss you, I love you, when are we going to see each other, we started discussing the opportunity that the pandemic had kind of presented in terms of different things for people to be supported and really feel like they had mental health support. So I've been a holistic wellness practitioner for the last 12 years and really working with a lot of clients and patients one-on-one. But when the pandemic happened, I just started to realize, just having conversations with clients, with colleagues, with friends, there was no real organizational wellness support structure once the pandemic actually happened. And so this all started with me offering my partner meditations, just because I saw how stressed he was about how uncertain his business was and how things were just failing all over the world. So we started doing live meditations together, and then I started sending him different mindfulness practices that he could start implementing into his days. And he asked me if he could start sending them on to other startup founders. And I was like, absolutely, no worries. And then those founders started asking for different types of sessions and started asking if they could invite their teams. And it kind of just became a little bit of a crowdsourced a little bit of a crowdsourced
Project.
product, to be
Yeah.
completely honest, and service. And I started connecting with other wellness facilitators that I've known from my journey in the wellness industry over the last few years to provide their expertise to companies. And now I'm at the space where I'm just happy to meet incredible wellness facilitators who can, share their gifts virtually with teams that can really use them and really need their skills the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
So that's how we
incredible.
started.
Wow. And
In a nutshell.
in a nutshell, yeah, that was a pretty good nutshell. And what did you do before that? Because you were saying that you were kind of already in that space before.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, to be completely honest with you, from a very young age, I always knew that I wanted to help people with healing themselves. I just didn't really understand what that looked like or what that meant for me until I went through my own healing journey and healing experience. I had a really bad fall when I was training to be a professional dancer, and that kind of led me on my path and my journey of healing. So I studied osteopathy, which is a holistic bodywork practice, osteopathic medicine, and honestly, working one-to-one with clients is not really my thing. Or not just that. Working with people's bodies in that setting was quite a lot for me, and I had a lot going on. So that kind of deterred me from clinical practice, but it put me into a space of being able to, teach more people and teach more, corporate seminars, more team building retreats, and teaching those kinds of formats. For again, these kinds of practices like wellness practices, keeping your body healthy, keeping yourself well as you age, all of these things that we don't necessarily get taught about. And that led me to a very interesting career that was starting to flourish right at the beginning of 2018, 2019, where I was traveling around the world consulting for hotels and resorts to build out different guest wellness programs. So we were hiring local people within the community and bringing them into hotel spaces, helping them to design beautiful wellness spaces within the hotels. And then obviously the whole hotel industry and travel industry disappeared overnight. So that career track kind of stopped dead in its tracks. But it provided me with a completely different opportunity to serve even more people and be in this format where I get to speak to thousands of people on a weekly basis virtually, and really connect in that way rather, which has actually been a real blessing for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow, what a cool story. So let's talk a little bit about remote work. I think, I'm actually really curious and excited about this conversation because we both work in the corporate space and we see how people are now working remotely. Let's start with, what do you think are the biggest challenges people have working from their homes?
Well, honestly, I think the biggest challenge is that it's your home. So it's kind of your everything space. So firstly, the biggest challenge is boundaries, just knowing firstly when to shut off, knowing how to separate yourself from home and work, knowing how to try to, designate yourself from, this is actually, I can't be having a conversation with my partner right now because I'm actually supposed to be working right now. And just setting those boundaries, I think, is a real challenge when it comes to actually starting your remote work journey. Even harder when you decide that you're going to travel and work remotely. Because I mean, even being in your home space is really difficult, but you get it after a little while because there's at least that routine and consistency of being at home. But if you're a remote worker and a digital nomad, and that also comes with its own challenges of, finding a place to work, finding a place that's sustainable, good internet connection, finding a community, finding, people who understand what you're doing, which is thankfully expanding now, and more people get, that way of life, and more companies are way more supportive of their employees deciding to work from wherever they want to. And that's wonderful. But obviously it does not come without its challenges. So obviously there are so many things that we're all learning in this brave new world of remote work. So yeah.
Yeah. And so what are the trends that you have been seeing maybe evolve and develop over the last 2 years since everyone had to start working from home?
It's really interesting that you ask, because the trend has kind of been around mental health and mental well-being. And I think that's just been a huge focus. Also just the trend of companies actually focusing on the well-being of their people. Because I mean, even before the pandemic happened, there were statistics flying around like 87% of employees actually really did look to the health and well-being programs of their future or prospective employers, just to make sure that there was some kind of well-being culture. And now I'm pretty sure that number has raised. There hasn't been any conclusive data since that Indeed study, but it definitely has gotten higher, and that being more of a priority, because obviously people want to do work that they care about, but they also want to feel like their company cares back and cares about them. So that's been a huge trend, I think. And obviously with all this great resignation and everyone just really redefining what work looks like for them, what they are willing to tolerate, how they want to work. In that space of reevaluation, I think a lot more people have, again, boundaries around like how they really want their company to interact with them in terms of a well-being program, and also just other well-being initiatives. So that's definitely been a huge trend. So just really a focus on well-being. And also it's been wonderful to have conversations with companies through this time, because at the beginning of the pandemic, it went from yeah, not really sure if we need this, or we can afford this, to we need something. Don't care how much it costs. Give us something. We just need something. And but it's a really interesting conversation to have seen evolve, and also just seeing how people's interest in virtual spaces has been evolving as well, and how their openness and receptivity to virtual events has been evolving. Because I think for a little while people were really burned out on virtual, and then they started just realizing it's actually here to stay, and it can be a really beneficial way of living our lives, because you don't have to leave your house to go to the gym, go to your yoga class, go and do things. So it really just gives you that time back. So that's also been a really interesting trend to kind of observe, that these virtual sessions, while being virtual and living on your computer may not be ideal, being able to have a whole new world of opportunity opened up to you just because you are in one spot, and we now have all of these services, I think is a real game changer.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple of like thoughts that I have about this as well. I feel like, first of all, like what you kind of mentioned, is like that, just embracing that new environment, right? Because I mean, we didn't really have a choice in 2020 to be like, okay, this is just how we're going to make it work. And a lot of the workshops that I actually facilitated in 2020 were around how to work like best practices working from home.
Seriously.
And because people didn't know, right? And I think that setting boundaries is a huge thing. And also one other thing that kind of came to mind as we were talking through it was also that individual versus like the corporate responsibility, because I feel like maybe there was almost more of a separation between those two before the pandemic, right? Where the individual would leave work and then you go to your yoga class or you go to your PT appointment, right? And now because people are working from home, it has also become that like shared responsibility of the corporation to think more closely about how can I actually help them through this, right? How can I help them create an environment that's the most stimulating and the most sustainable for them over time to be productive?
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely, I think, the key word in what you were saying, sustainability, because just realizing that it's not very sustainable to just, give people something that they can't really use long term, or they don't really have a habit around using in a long term fashion. So there really does need to be that focus on sustainability and making sure that this is a supportive method that actually can work for the long term, rather than just being a band-aid solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a number actually in mind. I'm going to pull it up really quickly. I don't usually do that, but I think it works so well. It is a research study from Microsoft, and they did this study last year. They brought it out in 2021. And they actually found that people were more productive working from home, but also more exhausted. And I think that that's not sustainable is really clear. So the numbers were the following. They were saying, while self-assessed productivity over the last year has remained the same or higher For most employees, the human cost is rising as we battle an ever-increasing and unsustainable digital load. What is most alarming to us is that 50% of people feel immense pressure to keep up and respond to team chats within 5 minutes or less. And I thought it was really interesting that Microsoft brought that out, and they were, surveying their employees and how they were doing and trying to obviously with that help other corporations as well. So what do you what do you see? What kind of habits have employees built or are building as we were talking in order to have maybe more of a sustainable work-life integration as they're bringing their work to their home life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, one thing I can say, especially with my clients, I can't necessarily say that this is obviously across the board, but one thing that I've been putting emphasis on with my clients is scheduling the breaks into the day. So actually making it a mindful or company-wide acknowledgement that this is something that is important to do for yourself every single day. And a company that I worked with right in the beginning of the inception of remote team wellness was actually a really great pioneer for this. So what I recommended for them was to send out a reminder every hour, a movement reminder for their team to just get their team moving around. And this was literally just like a little email that came through that was like, take 10 minutes, set your timer for 10 minutes and take a walk around your house, take a walk outside, if weather permitting, obviously, or do something that brings you joy. Put on a song and dance like a fool around your kitchen. Whatever it may be, do something to break up the movement of your body and get yourself away from the screen, because that helps you to kind of put yourself into a little bit of a reset state and allow yourself to not just be in this constant holding
Hunched
position, hunched over, like not really breathing fully, not getting your heart rate, your heart rate up. So that was a really, really fantastic trend and a habit that they've carried on for the last 2 years. And now that's just a reminder that's just normal for their team, which is fantastic. And I really, honestly, that's one of my little free takeaways for any team, to just actually schedule it into the day, make it something that is a priority, because that even just that importance, showing that your employees that's important to you, makes it so much more important and makes them feel so much more valued and like you actually care. So I really think that that's a huge shift that you can make very quickly. Another trend that I've been seeing for remote workers who have just been trying to figure out this remote work world is standing desks. I literally have conversations with my partner about this every single day, because we've been looking and like we're in the market for a standing desk. We're really, really looking for a really good solution that can fit both of our computers and be a nice space where we can either move up or down. And we've tested out a few different companies, but it's really wonderful to see and to be following like hashtag standing desk on different social medias, because it's wonderful to see how people are actually starting to realize like this is actually something that I need in my day. I can't be sitting all day. I can't allow myself to be in this sedentary position all day. And so I really love that movement and that trend is getting a lot of traction, because 1 in 4 Americans spending 85% of the day, or at least 5 hours of the day sitting, is a huge amount of risk for, just in terms of disease, like lifestyle diseases, heart disease, diabetes type 2, all of these things are really, really intense long-term effects of something that can be easily managed and prevented if we're conscious and aware, and making sure again that all of the practices that we have are sustainable.
In my head, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so guilty. I am sitting at a standing desk right now. And I got it 2 years ago as I was furnishing my new office. And, at the beginning, you are really good with the standing desk. And I do have to say, as for my defense, I have a dog that I'm taking out like 3 times a day. So he does keep me moving. But yeah, it's crazy. Like I have the standing desk and I'm using it very rarely, actually, unfortunately, but it's a good reminder that I should. And then I have another fun statistic about that actually as well that I just recently saw
Yes.
somewhere floating around on Instagram. But it basically said that most of the people are now sitting 5 hours or more during the day. And even if you have between 120 and 180 minutes of like higher vascular activity throughout the week, and you're sitting 5 hours a day, it completely
Cancels it
eliminates.
out.
Yeah, it totally
It's
eliminates like the
scary.
advantage of moving. So it's like, that 120 to 180 minutes of workout, which is 3 hours per week, that's a good amount of workout,
That's a
right?
good
But
amount of workout.
but it's not even registered in your body when you're sitting that much. So movement, so important. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. 100%. That's why I even say, like, just once an hour, get up and move around. You doesn't even have to be for a very long time. Just get up and go to the bathroom or walk to the fridge and get some more water.
Exactly.
That's another thing. Staying hydrated. So important while you're working remotely, especially if you're not moving, like allowing yourself to just take in more liquid than you think you need. Because not only is it going to hydrate your body and keep you alive because you're a human being, I assume, if you're listening to this podcast, but also it's going to help you to get up and move because you're going to need to pee so much. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great one. Okay, so we have regular breaks, standing or just movement, drinking water. What else do you see as good healthy habits that people are
as good healthy habits for working remotely from home? So another really nice tip that I have is to almost just give yourself a little bit of a check-in moment with yourself, and that comes for, so obviously a lot of companies are touting like meditation, which I think is a fantastic tool. It is a wonderful resource for mental health, for mindfulness, but we are in the middle of a mental health crisis, a mental health pandemic of itself. And one thing that I think that can be quite incremental in that for a lot of people is teaching themselves how to breathe properly. Now, hear me out on this, because I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive to talk about or think about breathing. But honestly, we as human beings have very few ways to consciously self-regulate ourselves. And breathing is probably our most important tool, our most valuable and powerful tool that can shift our state from a state of anxiety and stress to a state of calm and relaxation in a few minutes, literally, because of the way that breath, like, obviously helps us to regulate our nervous system, helps us to regulate our digestive system, all of these beautiful things that we, again, don't necessarily think about because it just happens automatically. But if we teach ourselves to consciously breathe, and we take conscious breathing breaks throughout the day when we're receiving stressful emails, when we feel overwhelmed and needing to respond to team messages very quickly, when we're feeling like we need to be on all the time, that puts us into a state of heightened stress and reactivity. And usually that shifts our breath up into our chest. We have two types of breath: chest breath and belly breath. So when we're breathing up in our chest and we're contracted, our shoulders are up and elevated, and we're feeling all of this tension in our bodies, it's very difficult for our nervous systems to relax and to get ourselves into a state of, wanting to go to sleep, wanting to, digesting our food properly. All of these things like really have a knock-on effect for a lot of other things that are happening in our lives in terms of our well-being. So by teaching yourself to consciously breathe and take conscious breathing moments, it's a really good way to start the day, to just take 10 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, and trying to breathe into the belly while doing that. That is already a way to kind of start your day on a conscious, clear, and focused note, where you are in control of your breath, rather than allowing your breath to be controlled and swayed by all of the things that you're reacting to and trying to respond to. Making sure that you have that baseline of control for yourself. And I think that's a really, really, again, it may seem just like something out of nowhere, but if you actually start to implement that into your day, just take 10 deep breaths in the morning when you wake up before you reach for your phone. 10 deep breaths as you're going to sleep, to just help your body kind of let go of the day, or release anything that you may be holding on to that may feel a little bit sticky or icky. It's a really wonderful way to just not only help your mental health, but help your physical health as well, and help yourself to just get out of that state of constant fight, flight, or freeze, and allow yourself to, invite in more states of rest, digest, de-stress, because that's really what we're aiming for. We're trying for the stress reduction. And that's something that we're all going to have to, we're all going to have to find in our own way, in our own, in the way that feels best to us. But it's a really, really great habit to take on when you are when you're working by yourself, when you're working at home. It's a really nice way to just kind of, distance yourself from anything that may irk you or annoy you or give you anxiety.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you're actually kind of distinguishing between just breathing exercises versus meditation, because I feel like a lot of people are always like, meditation, I can't sit still and I can't control my mind. And I'm totally guilty of that as well. Like I do meditations, but I do a lot of guided meditations because I feel like my mind is too busy to just sit there by itself most of the time. And so breathing is really the first step, and it's really what meditation at the end of the day is about.
Absolutely.
Would you be open to just guide us through a few minutes?
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Yeah. So basically, if you are listening to this and you are driving a car, I would ask you to please not do this practice, just because it's not safe to operate heavy machinery while, consciously breathing or doing any kind of deep breath. So if pull yourself over to the side of the road and just take a moment. But you're going to get your... No worries. Yeah, I have to say it because you just never know. Yeah. But just allow yourself to kind of get comfortable in the seat that you're in. Maybe letting yourself rest against the back of your chair. Maybe letting your hands come away from whatever device you're touching and put them into your lap, and just allowing yourself to notice the natural movement of your breath without trying to change it or alter it in any way. However you're breathing is perfect. Just noticing the places in your body that your breath expands. Noticing that subtle deflation sensation, feeling everything fall as you let the breath go. I want you to start to bring your awareness to your belly button. And take a nice deep breath in and try to push your belly button as far away from your body as possible. And then as you exhale, open your mouth and feel how your belly button just slowly relaxes and comes back. Take another breath like that, trying to really expand into your belly space. Feel how the belly extends out, filling up like a balloon as much as possible. And as you exhale, feel that relaxation, deflation sensation. One more breath, just like that. Full inhale, distended belly. Try and take in as much oxygen as you can here. Push the breath out, forward, side, back, front. And then open your mouth and gently let that go. Just allowing your breath to come back into its natural and normal rhythm. No more control over it. Become aware of where your body is in the space that you're in, the contact you're making with the chair that you're in. I invite you to just gently start to blink your eyes open if they are closed and allow the light to filter in. Maybe take a few moments and look around the room that you're in, letting your eyes get a bit of movement, look at different colors, shapes, textures. And then allow yourself to come back.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I find it always really powerful, like both to be obviously in the student position, but also to be a teacher and to see what, especially I think when you're teaching and, there's maybe a little bit of a higher stress level because you're teaching, right?
Yes.
To still see how much of a powerful effect it has to just go.
Absolutely. And just to watch people's faces change in general, because it really does. And even just share your experience of what that felt like. It's just a couple of minutes, but it really can just feel so calming to just allow yourself to come back, to just check back in. And that, and then often we get ourselves into these, really worked up spaces, or we get really stressed, we get really anxious, and it can feel like that's it. Like that can feel like everything. That whole space just takes over our mental space. And that is honestly, again, one of your most powerful tools and resources, to just call upon the breath, because you can go there anytime, no matter what anyone else says. It's free, it's simple, you can do it by yourself, for yourself, and it's a really wonderful tool.
I love that. Thank you so much for doing that with us. I did a yoga teacher training certification in 2018, and it was very focused on kind of like the 50 hours that I took back then in 2018 were very focused on the nervous system. And during the 2 weeks we had that intense training, our teacher would just do that check-in with us a few times during the day, where she would just be like, okay, we're just going to put our hands on our chest, and we're just going to close our eyes, and we're just going to take 2 deep breaths. And it was always so powerful, and I couldn't believe it, because I was like, wow, it's just like these 2 breaths, and even just like feeling yourself, or feeling like your hands on your chest, was such a soothing feeling. So I always say to people, even if it's just that, if you because so many people think, oh, I don't have time, I'm back to back in meetings, it's like, it literally takes 90 seconds to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So you have those 90 seconds, like even if you are going to pee and you do it while you're sitting on the toilet, like you can always find those really quick moments of just breathing, and it can make such a big difference of if you are in this like reactive mode and you're taking things too personally, or you are more of an observer and a proactive person in whatever comes your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think honestly, just even around the conversation we're having around working from home, to really, again, just be able to do that for yourself at any moment. And you may not have the time to do that at the office. You may feel a little bit embarrassed or weird to do that at your desk, but you can just go into the bathroom, or you can't, like, maybe putting your hands on your chest may not look like you may feel a little bit self-conscious about that. Just go into the bathroom. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a lot about setting boundaries, and you mentioned it a lot. Do you have any tips on that front of what people can do to set better boundaries?
To set better boundaries, be aware of your boundaries. To be honest, that is the first thing when it comes to setting boundaries, is to know what your boundaries are and where your boundaries are. Because if you get yourself into a space where your boundaries are being crossed very often, and then you become reactive, or like you say, just you start taking things extremely personally, it's almost gone too far. So then really to kind of pull it back all the way to the beginning and be like, okay, so I find myself triggered by X, Y, and Z. I find myself triggered by this email from my boss, or the way that this coworker speaks to me. I find myself triggered. Make sure that you're aware of those things, because that's also a really important part of stress reduction, to know what stresses you out, to know why you're being triggered, why you're reacting snappily, or you're getting angry, or you're fighting or becoming defensive. So know where those triggers are coming from, and then define boundaries around them. So maybe you now know, I get triggered when my boss asks me to do something right at the end of the day, when I have already set the boundary of, like, I'm finishing at 6. Then you have to actually enforce that boundary and say, I'm finishing at 6 though, so I'm not able to do that. Maybe I can do that tomorrow, but I've already established this preset boundary, and allowing yourself to actually just really own that boundary. Like, obviously not within reason. Don't be telling your boss, like, I'm not doing any work for you.
Exactly.
But allowing yourself to just own the things that you value, because otherwise, if you don't hold on to that and you don't express that in a healthy and adult way, then you'll find yourself getting your boundaries kind of trampled on, or or, you know, like kind of stomped on in a way that you don't necessarily appreciate. And then it can get into a space where you can't respond in a calm or rational way. And that can feel really upsetting too. And that's not a space that you want to be in. So set really good boundaries, know what your boundaries are. Another way to set really good boundaries is to just kind of have conversations with, I honestly purport, I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and I think that every single person needs a therapist. And if that's something that your company can do for you, even better. But like, I really do think that you need to have conversations about where your boundaries are and why you get triggered about the things that you get triggered about. So having, you know, someone that you trust to support you in that process and through that process is a really, really incredible tool as well when it comes to setting very powerful boundaries for yourself. But really, it really comes down to knowing yourself so that you have an awareness of why the boundaries are important to you, and, you know, like, and you can really enforce them with confidence, but not in a rude way, just confidence and respect, because it shows that you respect yourself.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the communication part is so interesting when you were saying like have these conversations, because I think so often we think that these conversations have taken place in our head, right? We're like, it should be so clear that I'm finishing at 6 o'clock, right? But nobody else knows that, especially as we are not holding true to our own boundaries, and we, you know, we don't enforce them, but we also don't, you know, stick to them all the time. We're not ruthless about them. And so people don't know, they just don't know. And it was super interesting. I just recently talked to a manager team from one of my corporate companies, and they were saying, we were talking about time management, and, you know, there's so many, it's so interesting. I'm sure like you experienced that as well, because as we are in this space and we talk about this all the time, it's kind of like a no-brainer to us anymore, certain tools, right? And so for me, it's always really interesting what really resonates with people and what made like a huge difference to them. And so one of the participants said, yeah, he's like, I put a start date and an end date on my calendar, and it's been so powerful, because not only is it powerful for me to see when do I start my day and when do I end my work day, but also for the people that I work with. And he's like, it worked so well over the last 6 weeks. And I'm just like, wonderful, this is amazing. Because it's so simple, right? And all of the things that Tarin and I just talked about over the last 30 minutes are in fact all super simple tools. And we are always looking for these complex solutions. And I hear that from people all the time that are like, yeah, I like it to be complex and complicated, because then it feels like I'm achieving something more. But we oftentimes are having a hard time to stick then to these complicated rules that we're setting for ourselves. And it is really powerful to go back to the basics.
100%. Yeah, because it comes back to, again, the conversation we were having around sustainability. Like, yes, maybe you think it's more complex and like advanced if you're doing this really long process, or I know for myself, like I had this with my own like structuring of a morning routine, where I was like, I have to spend 15 minutes journaling, and then I spend 30 minutes doing the yoga, and then I spend 10 minutes breathing, and then I go and make myself like all of these things that I mean, like I after a few days, I'm like, I can't stick to this. I don't have the time, you know, because it's too complex. Whereas if I just keep it simple, like the first hour of the day is for me. It just clears everything up.
Yeah,
you know, the first hour of the day is focused on whatever I need to focus on that's going to be good for me in my well-being. And whether that is yoga or breathing or journaling or whatever it may be, it's for me. So that's all I need to focus on. And that's simple. And that means that I can sustain that because I know what the goal is. And I understand that that's what I have the time marked off on my calendar. That's, again, a non-negotiable boundary for me. So I think also, I think that another thing that kind of came to my head while you were talking about that was also just when you were talking about the guy who kind of set himself like a daily boundary of that. Giving yourself deadlines when you are working from home is a game changer. Giving yourself a deadline, especially if you are your own boss, especially if you're, you know, doing a side project, you have a side hustle or whatever it may be, having a deadline around it is so important, because otherwise, let's just be real, you probably won't get it done. You won't.
Or you procrastinate and you're like,
or
I'm
you
gonna do this next
procrastinate.
week.
Exactly. I can do it when this happens, or I can do it when this
Mhm.
happens. And then you almost get into this pattern of self-betrayal, and you're not respecting your own boundaries. So then that also puts you into a state of being able to be triggered by other people who don't respect your boundaries, because in the first place you're not respecting your own boundaries. So it's also important, it comes back to that lesson: know thyself, know what you're capable of, know what your energy can manage. Don't think that you need to do a million different things, a million different tasks in a day. You don't, like, all of these huge to-do lists stress me out. Give yourself a to-do list of three huge things that you need to get done for the day, and you'll be so proud of yourself. You clap for yourself because you can do 3 things a day. You can do it. That's all good. Doing 67 things a day, I don't know about that. I think you're probably going to burn out on that. But you know, to each their own. We all have to learn in our own way. And sometimes it just takes you actually realizing, maybe simplifying this is actually the answer. Maybe the answer is not to add more, but to take away something, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that resonates so much with me. Yeah, that's powerful. I would love to know if there's any books that you've read in that space, or also can also be totally unrelated, whatever resonated with you, that kind of changed your life or your mindset about maybe something that you thought of one way before, and then you kind of shifted into another type of thinking because of the book.
Yeah, definitely. And like I'm gonna like kind of mix it up, because I have 3 books that I want to recommend. The first book is the first kind of like light bulb moment in terms of just really having a purpose, and like I really believe in living a purpose-driven life. And so like I have had a lot of experiences where I've done things that haven't necessarily felt like they're aligned with my purpose and the thing that I feel like I'm here to do, and that doesn't feel good for me. So reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho changed the game for me in that, and just realizing and understanding that, what it means to be living from your heart and living in a purpose-driven way. And it's just a very special book, a beautiful story. So I highly recommend that one. But then also, like, kind of just in my entrepreneurial journey and really trying to create this whole new culture of, you know, mindfulness in the workplace and stuff, I've gotten to encounter some really incredible people, including the ex-head of mindfulness and compassions programs at LinkedIn. His name is Scott Shute, and he wrote this incredible book last year called The Full Body Yes. That was also a real game changer for me, and how I was looking at the work that I was doing, again, trying to create a heart-centered business and doing this work for companies around the world that, again, are just changing and reshifting and shaping their priorities. So The Full Body Yes by Scott Shute is also a fantastic book. And then my last book that I highly, highly recommend is, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but the book is called Flow, and it's by a Russian behavioral scientist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I think. I think that's how you pronounce it. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And it is really just all about the optimal state of flow for performance and well-being. So the concept of flow is basically any activity that, you know, you can kind of lose yourself in, and it's getting to a state or a space where you feel like you literally, like, time has not passed, but you are just so locked in on what you're doing because you love it so much, you're so passionate about it. And I think it's an important book for every person to read, because everyone deserves to feel that way about the things that they're doing in their lives. And to really consciously take yourself into that state, you have to be aware of the things that, you know, that don't bring you that joy, and the things that you're really good at that do bring you that joy. So I really recommend that as a book, especially if you're looking for, again, like, where's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? Like, how am I going to get to the next level in my life? It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and a really great examples. He does a lot of great field research and talks about, like, how other high performers see flow as a state and as an experience, and like how people do work that they enjoy their whole lives. So I really, really recommend those 3 books. Amazing. Alchemist, Full Body Yes, and Flow.
Okay. And a question on the flow state. What is maybe one thing or one tool that you implemented to find that state maybe more regularly? Kind of curious.
Meditation.
Yeah.
For me. Absolutely, meditation.
Okay.
And yoga, actually. So for me, my meditation is always movement based. So I really do love, I'm kind of like you, like sitting still for a long time with all of the thoughts. I can do it for a little while. I'd rather focus on the breathing, to be completely honest. But I really enjoy to move my body and kind of get into a space of movement where I don't even think about the time. And I think that comes from my my past in dance and performance, because I really can just like put on music and get completely lost in movement. And that's a really beautiful way for me to access my flow state, to get, you know, kind of lost in the movement of my body, because the physical body is a really fantastic way to enter into, you know, our other conscious states, our emotional state, our mental state. All of these things kind of open up when you unlock the physical, which is why it's important to move your body. So that's definitely my jam. I love a little bit of movement, love a little bit of dance. I'm actually going to salsa in a few hours.
Nice.
So
awesome.
yeah.
And how do you, so okay, I do have to ask another question about this, because I find it super intriguing. So as you are moving, right, and maybe some people are wondering this now as they're listening too. So, you know, you're trying to access the flow state to maybe get an important project done at work, but you know that you can access your flow state through movement, for example. How do you translate that? So can I imagine that you are, you know, do some movements, like some yoga movements or some dancing, and then you go sit back at your desk and then it flows more for you?
For me, it's standing up. This is why I need a standing desk.
Okay.
Standing up and moving my body like this.
Okay.
Moving my hips. And usually I have some kind of music. I'll usually have music on if I don't have a call. Like I really love music in my environment. That's just something that helps me to focus. So usually, again, like when I'm in the flow, I don't even realize that I'm moving. It's not like I'm like, I need to stand and dance right now. I'll usually just naturally want to go and stand up so that I can be moving while I'm working, which is cool. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. How can people connect with you if they're curious to learn more about remote team wellness?
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So if you would like to connect with me to learn more about remote team wellness, you can always visit us at remoteteamwellness.com, or please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions about how this can help your team. My email address is Tarin, Tarin, at remoteteamwellness.com. And if you want to find me and connect with me on social media or anything, you can find me on all of the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, at Tarin Calmeyer. I'll spell that one out for you. TarinCalmeyer. And that's me on all the socials. I would love to chat with you, connect with you, hear your experiences about how you're coping with remote work, how your organization is doing, and yeah, just have really open conversations. I'm very interested in, again, making sure that this is a sustainable shift that we're all equipped for and supported in.
Amazing. I will also make sure that I'm obviously linking all of that in the show notes again as well, so you don't have to you don't have to have a piece of paper and pen ready right now. We'll make sure that you have it all linked in the show notes. And yeah, I had just one last thought, but it slipped away. Let me think if it comes back to me. No, but this was really inspirational and really enriching. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been such a wonderful time to get to know you, and also to just have more conversations about remote work and more conversations about wellness in general. This is my passion in my work. So I really appreciate the opportunity to get to do it.
You're very welcome. You know, I always believe that there can't be enough of us working in the corporate space, because there's millions of companies that need help and millions of employees that need help. And it's always, for me, it's always really wonderful to meet other people that are in the same space and, you know, that have maybe a different angle or different approach to employee wellness. And I think we all together will hopefully we will uplift the corporate space as well and help people overall to live a healthier life. So it's my pleasure.
100%.
Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, maybe we'll do another podcast in the future. If you have any more questions for us, for Tarin or me, we'll make sure to collect them, and then I'll reach out to Tarin and we'll have another chat. But yeah, thank you so much, and I wish you a really wonderful rest of your day.
Right back at you, Julia. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.